So, as you would have seen from my previous minisodes, Girls Planet 999 was a very experimental show and was also a very rigged show. It was experimental in terms of attempting to revise the Produce franchise and testing the waters for both an Mnet show and for Mnet's particular brand of Riggory. And although it was pretty much a failure by Produce standards, it was successful in achieving both of these goals, and Mnet launched almost immediately into enacting their true plan, the true revival of Produce with Boys Planet. Just Boys Planet, not Boys Planet 999, because not only were there no longer 99 contestants, but also the 999 was too closely associated with Girls Planet and was useless, so they dropped it. Really, this should have been called Boys Planet 101, but even Mnet weren't daring enough to do that. Anyway, just as Girls Planet was rigged, so was Boys Planet, only no one seemed to notice, which I thought was bizarre. Mnet were far more subtle in their riggory in Boys Planet than in Girls Planet, and because they learned from their mistakes in Season 1, well, Season 2 went far better, with one huge exception. When Boys Planet finished on the 20th of April 2023, and Mnet and Wake One executives looked at their new boy group, I bet they were thinking to themselves, how in the world did we spend so much effort on this and still end up with Ricky in this group? Okay, I'm sure their thoughts were way more complex than that, and they had other issues than Ricky. For instance, Jung Hao being the center and Gyuvan getting into the group, but Ricky was definitely the one they were kicking themselves over the most. In this video, I'll take you through the history of Boys Planet and the riggory of it from start to finish. You probably know roughly what this will look like, because let's be honest, if you're interested enough in survival shows to watch this, it's decently likely you've already watched my videos about the riggory of Girls Planet and Island 2. And if you haven't and think you might be interested, I'd recommend you do, especially part 1 of the Girls Planet version, since those videos do a lot of the groundwork for this one. Either way, after I've taken you through the riggory of the show, focusing more on the structural choices rather than the editing of particular trainees, we'll consider the consequences. How perfect or not so perfect was this lineup for Mnet? Did they get their way? What about the consequences for Zero Base 1 and their promotions? And how about the consequences for Island 2 and Boys 2 Planet? Interesting. This video kind of has a trigger warning. Obviously, Mnet and all of the things they do will be discussed here. That includes emotional manipulation of trainees, mistreatment of trainees, Sinophobia, and other related topics. However, I won't go into most of these in detail. This video also has a disclaimer. I haven't actually watched Boys Planet in full since it was first aired in 2023. I've watched extended segments of it for my video on Hui and to relive some of its greatest hits, but I've never rewatched the entire show and don't intend to until I've watched the first 4 seasons of Produce first. Hence, although I'll obviously try to minimize them, this video may have some minor inaccuracies just based on my memory. I'll probably make a remastered version of this video when I eventually get back around to watching Boys Planet again. Probably sometime in 2029 if I continue at my current pace. Anyway, with all of that said, let's take a quick look at the history of Boys Planet for my few, but very appreciated viewers who watch my videos without even fully understanding them. Yes, I know they exist. Boys Planet, no, not Boys Planet 999, was an Mnet K-pop survival show which ran from February to April 2023. The show featured 98 male trainees across 2 groups, international and Korean, although 5 trainees dropped out before the show aired. The remaining 93 contestants competed for a spot in the final group, with the finale aired on April 20th, 2023, creating the group Zero Base 1. The final group was made up of Junghao, Hanbin, Matthew, Ricky, Gunuk, Tele, Gyuvan, Jiwoong, and Yujin, 6 Korean trainees and 3 international or global ones. Boys Planet was the follow-up male season to Girls Planet 999, a show which I've become horribly fascinated with, for its role as an experimental black sheep of the Produce franchise, intended to reboot the series after a rigging scandal in 2019. Although Girls Planet and Kepler weren't nearly as successful as they should have been, they did fulfill their main goal, opening the floodgates for more Produce-style content in the future. Hence, Boys Planet, which had a very different format from Girls Planet. Mnet scrapped anything that didn't work in Girls Planet and returned to a formula more closely aligned with the original produce series for Boys Planet. And it was mega successful. Boys Planet broke the internet, or more like dominated the internet for 6 months from announcement to finale, and even past the finale. In fact, it kind of dominates to this day. Even just looking at the ratings, Boys Planet had consistently higher ratings than Girls Planet, and the finale reached 1.2% in Korea, while Girls Planet only reached 0.8%. Boys Planet also had an average rating of 0.8% nationwide, while Girls Planet had an average of only 0.7%. Boys Planet started with lower ratings for sure, but very quickly surpassed the previous season. Also, Kepler have never sold more than 400,000 copies of an album, but Zero Base One have never sold less than 1 million copies per album. Kepler are only just approaching the 2 million sales mark, while Zero Base One are almost at 8 million. I wrote this before Iconic released, so I imagine they'd be approaching 10 million now. Even considering the difference in popularity between boy and girl groups, this difference is insane. Also, Kepler have a year and a half more to their name than Zero Base One do, and yet they've only sold about a quarter of what their brother group have. So with that dichotomy of the success of Girls and Boys Planet well established, let's talk about why. The Riggory of Boys Planet, that's why. I'll shorten the first part of this section since I already discussed many of these things in the Girls Planet videos. If you want a more in-depth overview of the Riggory of the show's pre-airing format, you can watch the first section of the first Riggory of Girls Planet 999 minisode. In that section, I talked about how having 3 groups, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, put international trainees at a disadvantage from the start, since they are pitted against Korean trainees who are favoured by both the Korean general public and by the show itself. And since they are more likely to struggle experiencing a language barrier. These, or at least certainly the latter, seem underappreciated as issues facing global trainees on these shows. Most people can recognise that the Korean public likes Korean trainees more, but not many people talk about how insanely large of an impact language barriers and being away from your home country could have on a contestant's understanding of instructions, interpersonal relationships, and general anxiety and health condition. This worked very well for Mnet in Season 1. They could evil edit Chinese trainees, and international trainees in general struggled with language barriers, while Koreans were pushed to the top. Hence, they kept it for Season 2 with a slight adjustment. By making it only 2 groups, Korean and Global, Mnet gave the Koreans an even greater advantage. Not only were there more of them, but while Girls Planet viewers expected a 3:3:3 ratio, Boys Planet viewers could realistically expect at most a 5:4 Korean Global ratio, and the difference between a predicted 4 Global trainees and a real 3 is far lower than the predicted 6 Global trainees and real 3 in Girls Planet. Hence, lower expectations and less anger at more Koreans. Cue the evil laughter. Believe it or not, Mnet do understand the concept of subtle Riggory. In my Girls Planet video, I also mentioned the 50-50 vote ratio, which is pretty obvious Riggory. The use of interim ranks to encourage panic voting or complacency depending on the trainee, and the demo stages. The demo stages are rigged, obviously, through who gets shown and who doesn't, and through the editing making a performance look either better or worse than it actually is. But they're also rigged through song choice and styling. For instance, Gunnock was given a far better outfit than the rest of his team, which emphasised his figure and made him look powerful, contributing to his ace image and making him stand out. The Jellyfish group were also given a song that suited them well, while other trainees like the My House and Hot guys were given songs that didn't suit them to make them look bad. This Riggory via songs and outfits also includes things like the Red and Blue House and Yuha G versus K group rivalries. Creating these artificial rivalries through using the same songs creates tension and lets Mnet highlight trainees they like or to make comic relief characters out of the 2 houseboys. This also contributes to the K vs G rivalry. K contestants were styled as cool and powerful, while G group contestants had more chaotic styling. This was a difference even pointed out during the show, and which allowed Korean trainees to subtly seem more organised, cohesive, and skilled. Mnet can even change the performance order to dictate whether trainees are more refreshed and hydrated or tired and borderline losing it. I also talked about how the structure of the show and the use of stress-inducing things like interim checks after only a small amount of time to learn choreographies, the traumatic elimination rounds, and more would encourage people to break or otherwise act out. But this is something that has been part of reality shows since the beginning of time, so it shouldn't really surprise you. Now, let's talk about the mentors. The mentors are the mouthpieces of Mnet / the producers, and the feedback they give to trainees is likely dictated by Mnet, based on which trainees they want to highlight. For instance, the mentors mentioning how Junghao should be kept in Korea because of his pronunciation, or the MCs reinforcing the Sarangae Nuna Yujin thing. Both of these were designed to make the trainees more salient and push the audience to vote for them. This works in conjunction with the editing. For instance, Junghao and Gunnock being highlighted through positive mentor feedback while also having a highlighted mini edit of becoming closer to each other, and also having well-edited performances. These things all associated the two with each other and made them look better as performers and people, encouraging fans to vote for them. Oh, speaking of, Mnet almost certainly led trainees in the confessionals, and they 100% spliced together confessionals to make some trainees look good and some look bad. For instance, having trainees praise another trainee they like, or showing people being upset with trainees they want to evil edit. No matter how out of context these clips actually are. Also, speaking of the mentors, read Mnet, choose the star ratings and the centers of the signal song, allowing them to highlight or make invisible people as they see fit, and allowing them to borderline guarantee Hanbin and Junghao's placement in the group. Similarly to Kepler, note how none of the members of Zero Base One had a ranking lower than 3 stars, outside of Ricky, who got 2 stars and who Mnet didn't want in the group anyway. The reason for them all being 3 and 4 stars is to encourage the fans to believe they're good performers, while not putting all of them in 4 stars, hence discouraging rigging accusations and encouraging fans to think that there's hope for trainees outside of the top numbers. This is similar to most of Mnet's ideal Kepler lineup being in the top half of the signal song rankings on Girls Planet. They weren't just 1 through 9, hence it wasn't Riggory, but they were in the top half, so no one would riot if they made it in after showing growth. Speaking of the signal song, I didn't think much of it outside of the above, and which trainees were given more screen time, up until I rewatched it a few weeks ago at time of writing and noticed something that shocked me. Look here at the beginning. Obviously, Halbin are in the centre, surrounded by the other All-Stars, but right next to them, the next most salient people are Gunnock and Matthew, right at the front and centre, 2 trainees Mnet want in the final group. Next to Matthew, the next most salient is Keita, someone else Mnet want in the final group. Now, the only missing link here is that Tere, who Mnet really want in, is at the back, when really he should be next to Gunnock. Here, where someone who I think is Even's Junghyun is? I don't think Mnet wanted Junghyun in the group, so this doesn't make sense. But what does make sense is that Tere is a weaker dancer than Gunnock and Junghyun, so it also makes sense that he's at the back. But do note that he is still easily seen by the camera, and also he gets a lot of screen time. And this is all well and good. It makes sense that Mnet would put people they like closer to the front. But what really gets me about this is that in the bridge, everyone walks around the stage, right? It looks like they probably have enough time to move like maybe 30 degrees around the circle, right? But when the dance break starts, guess who's right next to Halbin still? Yep, Gunnock and Matthew, and also Keita and Junghyun. Gunnock was so rigged into this group. Mnet literally bent physics to give him greater salience. This is insane. Halbin and Matthew were also rigged, but I was a bit surprised that I hadn't noticed this about Gunnock in particular before. Let this serve as your daily reminder that I have also been fooled in the past by Mnet and thought I had the free will of voting for Gunnock when really I was entirely playing into Mnet's hands. Now let's talk about the actual show. On Girls Planet, the producers, read Mnet, picked which team won which battle, but for Boys Planet, COVID lockdown had lifted and Mnet knew a live audience is important for increasing engagement. Hence, in came the fans. But don't be fooled. Just because Mnet didn't choose the winners doesn't mean it wasn't rigged. I mean, first, they could well have rigged which team won, since I bet audience members weren't tallying who they all voted for to double check Mnet's numbers, but let's assume for the sake of analysis that they weren't. Mnet made three main Riggory choices here. First, they obviously edited different trainees and teams in different ways, but they also decided to 1. Hold the performances in Korea, meaning the audience would be largely Korean, and 2. Create the teams, not across countries, but in global versus Korean matchups. Oh, Casper, why is this Riggory? My children, have you learned nothing? By running audience voting in this way, in Korea, Mnet encourages a Korean audience who they know are predisposed to vote for Korean trainees, and they know if they pit Korean trainees against global trainees and ask for what is essentially a popularity vote between them, the audience will make the Korean group win almost every time. This suits Mnet well since they want Koreans to win and gain benefits so fewer of them are eliminated. The literal only matchup they want the global trainees to win is pretty obvious, guys. It's Kill This Love. Now, this may just sound like I'm claiming that Mnet got what they wanted because I need to justify a G group winning after what I just said, but I have evidence as to why this matchup was clearly rigged. First, why would Mnet want the G group to win? Well, first, to create an underdog arc. Very few, if any, G groups will win, but they can't realistically have every single K group win, or the fans will riot. So having one win makes sense, and this is the G group that they like the best. It has their three favourite global trainees, Junghao, Matthew and Keita, and trainees they've established to be skilled like Chen Kunwei. If this group wins, Mnet's favourite global trainees get a little boost, and get more screen time for their skills. Also, it just makes sense for Junghao, the global centre, to win. Even better for Mnet, Ganuk, one of their favourite trainees, is on the other team and orchestrated that team's creation. If Ganuk loses, they can give him an underdog or redemption storyline in the next mission, which they well and truly managed to do with Tomboy. Also, they don't really need to worry about Ganuk not getting the benefit and being eliminated. They've given him 4 stars and lots of screen time, so he's likely to at least have enough votes to make the episode 5 cut. And if that wasn't enough, Mnet have seen his rankings in the first episode, and know he's well above the cutoff, sitting around 15th. Based on the data they have, they know he'll be fine, both rank-wise and emotionally. Now, how did Mnet actually manipulate this battle? Well, they got lucky in that Hwanhee was sick and the G group had more members, but they also made the G group look cooler through giving them significantly better outfits and giving them the blood to put on their faces, which suited the concept of the song. This extreme difference in styling and conceptual quality, which didn't happen for any other battle, is, I think, a plain indication of Mnet favouring the G group. So this, combined with their luck, Hwanhee's sickness, and the G group having more skilled trainees, allows them to relatively easily have the G group win the battle. Goal achieved. But make no mistake, Ganuk still gets the killing part and is very salient. In fact, I have my suspicions about Mnet's luck. I wouldn't be surprised if they planted the idea of Kill This Love in Ganuk's head, or said something to the live audience, or even went as far as to do something to Hwanhee. Obviously, I wouldn't accuse them of something like that, and it would be low even for Mnet. It's a conspiracy theory, and not even a believable one at that, but honestly, I wouldn't put it past them. Alright, moving on to the dual position round. As usual for produce, by letting the higher ranking trainees have priority over their songs, Mnet allows them to create the strongest teams for songs that suit them best, thus allowing the top trainees, most positions of which are already occupied by Mnet favourites via previous Riggory, to have the best chance of winning possible. This is another form of subtle Riggory. For instance, Mnet don't even need to worry about Ganuk, Junghao and Hanbin. They had the power to pick their own songs and they stuck together, so they were guaranteed to win through sheer popularity alone as soon as Tomboy Team was formed. The other two battles aren't as clear-cut. Both Love Killer Team and Law Team have the most popular trainees, but since most of Mnet's favourites were concentrated in Tomboy, they're more spread out here. Love Killer is who Mnet would want to win since the team includes Jiwing and Matthew, but it also includes Gyuvin, who they don't really want, and Sewon, who they're neutral to. The rap and dance battle is an interesting one. From Mnet's perspective, I think it was a toss-up between Law Team and Zoom Team. Law includes Yujin, their desired maknae, and Park Hanbin, who they really like, but Zoom Team includes Keita, who they want to lift up as a desired global trainee. Honestly, they probably did want Law to win, but only by a small margin. Wow, the power of popularity! Moving on to the third round, the artist battle. As I mentioned on Girls Planet, Mnet basically had the ability to pick which trainees went in which groups for the mission, as long as it's vaguely plausible. And even after the eliminations, they can whisper in trainees' ears to encourage them to move to different teams. Through either Riggory or sheer luck, or a combination of both, they managed to concentrate all of the trainees they don't like in Supercharger Team. And out of the other 4 teams, it doesn't really matter who wins. Say My Name would be their preference with 4 trainees they really like, but Over Me has Junghao, Switch has Park Hanbin, Keita and Tere, and On Guard has Gunnook. This is the singular round in which I think Mnet didn't get their way. Through the power of sexiness and against all popularity odds, Over Me team managed to win the artist battle, with 4 global trainees of Chinese ethnicity and with 2 Chinese trainees Mnet really didn't like, no less. This didn't bode well for Mnet. By all rights and by all of their riggory, Say My Name should have won. This was the start of the Chinese trainees striking back. Bwahaha! Next, the final battle. Yet again, Mnet allows the higher ranking trainees, aka the more popular trainees who they rigged into those positions, to pick the parts that suit and highlight them the most, and they allow the audience to pick the centres, which obviously would be Halbin since their vote popularity was so much higher than the other trainees. A very predictable result, and if I could predict it, Mnet definitely could, and that's why they made it that way. Before the finale, they announced the interim ranks. Sung Hanbin at 3rd, Park Hanbin at 10th, and Tere at 11th. Note how they're all Koreans? This is pretty obvious. They wanted Hanbin fans to freak out and vote him to rank 1, since we can imagine Junghao was sitting at 1st here and Mnet liked Junghao, but they did not want a Chinese centre. Park Hanbin and Tere were shown just below the cutoff for the group to try and boost both into the group. Based on the final results, I imagine Mnet wanted Ricky and Gyuvan to be pushed out, and at this point, Jay was probably in the top 9 as well. I reckon at this point Mnet had kind of given up on Keita getting into the group and Ricky being dropped, but they at least wanted to push Jay out, which succeeded. This attempt at finale riggory somewhat worked. Tere made the group, and Hanbin overtook who was probably Matthew at rank 2 to rank 2nd. But Park Hanbin didn't make the group, Junghao was still the centre, and Ricky and Gyuvan remained. Notably, Mnet didn't show the full results for the interim and didn't have a partial interim reveal during the actual episode. Both of these would have revealed how close Jay was to debut, and would have likely led to him pushing Yujin out of the group. And as much as I would love Maknae Gunnook, Mnet really wanted Maknae Yujin, and there was no way they'd take Jay over him. Despite the failure of their riggory to replace Ricky with Park Hanbin, the 50-50 ratio and their earlier riggory still worked well for Mnet. They ended up with 6 Koreans, 1 ethnically Korean international trainee, a Chinese person they liked, and only 1 Chinese person they didn't like, so a relatively successful final group. And thus, Zero Base 1 went out into the world, and Mnet took a riggory break, setting it aside to next be used on Island 2. Okay, great. Now let's talk about the consequences I mentioned earlier. I haven't written a full list of trainees who made it or didn't make it where Mnet wanted them the same way I have with Girls Planet, so unfortunately I have no solid stats for you, but I can still make educated guesses. First things first, I think that Mnet had pretty much their ideal final 18. I don't think they really cared about Gyuvan and Jonghyun and would have possibly replaced them with Seunghwan, Junghyun or Jihu if they could have, but they didn't mind too much. The only person they really didn't want in the top 18 who got in was Ricky, who they would have replaced with Ollie, I think, or maybe Shuaibo for a Jing Chao type. Drama, but unlikely to get in. I think they were pretty neutral for Jay. They didn't want him in the group and probably didn't particularly want him in the top 18, but they didn't have the same hatred for him they had for Ricky, and they didn't mind him being in the top 18, they just didn't want him in the final group. So I would say they got 17 out of 18 of a top 18 they were happy with, and maybe 15 out of 18 of their ideal top 18. As far as the final group, I think they got 8 out of 9 members they were okay with. The only one they really didn't like, editing-wise, is Ricky, and they got 7 out of 9 good/ideal members, I think. They didn't particularly want Guven, but similarly to Jay, I don't think they had as strong negative feelings towards him as towards Ricky. Yes, I think it's controversial to say they didn't really mind having Jay, but I genuinely don't think they hated him, certainly not as much as Ricky. I really feel like his biggest issue was the fact that he was against Eugen, and there was absolutely no way they would have Jay in the group over Eugen. Like, nah. So what about the 0-base-1 lineups? Well, based on our knowledge of Korean and international votes, let's discuss. I only managed to find this one post on the topic, which was apparently based on the third round K to G ratios, therefore isn't entirely accurate to the finale, but is our best guess. But if we assume it is true, this gives us some interesting information, such as showing how Gunnock had a quite high global vote to Korean vote ratio for a Korean trainee, and how Jay and Keita had insanely high G to K vote ratios, both being over 22 G votes for every K vote. This makes sense considering both Keita and Jay had large global appeal but not much Korean appeal, and considering Gunnock's apparently insane popularity in Japan, which I mentioned in my original 0-base-1 episode, and which a commenter pointed out is probably because of his Gap Moe appeal, something I ridiculously hadn't even considered but really should have thought of. Oddly enough, the lowest G to K ratio goes to Kamden with a ratio of 1.43, closely followed by Seungin at 1.45. Why? I'm not entirely sure. The results may have been skewed by their lower numbers of votes in general. Anyway, these results mean that the final group, as voted by Koreans, would likely be in order: Hanbin, Tere, Guven, Junghao, Ricky, Jiwoong, Eugen, Gunnock, and Matthew. Which is hilarious, because that's literally just a 0-base-1 with the Hanbin center Mnet always wanted. Okay, more seriously, I'm surprised that Ricky was this popular with Korean audiences too. He really had the fan vote power on his side. But more importantly, I want you to note that this is, like I said, literally just the members of 0-base-1 reordered with the global trainees lower. This shows the insane benefit of the 50-50 vote system in advantaging Korean audience opinions and Korean trainees. This happened on Girls Planet too. The final lineup was far closer to the final Korean lineup than the final international one. However, this effect is far more pronounced in Boys Planet. The difference between the Korean and real lineup is non-existent, while the difference between the global and real lineups, as we'll see soon, is quite different. This shows how Mnet's strategy continues to work, and how it even improved from Girls Planet to Boys Planet. I mean, I assume that getting closer to the Korean ideal lineup is a good thing from Mnet's perspective, hence this is an improvement. Also, Gunnock is likely lower because of his huge Japanese one pick. Anyway, the global lineup would be, in order, Junghao, Matthew, Jay, Keita, Ricky, Hanbin, Gunnock, Jiwoong, and Eugen. As we would expect, here the global trainees dominate the top half of the rankings, and this group has a member ratio of 5 global to 4 Korean. As far as a lineup based on equally weighted votes, this table doesn't include it, but I have calculated the top 18 numbers, which I'll show on screen. Unless I've calculated something incorrectly, this gives us an estimated lineup of 1. Junghao, who by this estimate was the only trainee to get over 1 million votes, and who would have had over 250,000 more votes than Hanbin. Matthew, Hanbin, Ricky, Jay, Keita, Gunnock, Jiwoong, and Eugen, with Guven in 10th and Tere in 11th. This group has a ratio of 5G to 4K and is the same lineup as the global lineup, with the exception of Hanbin rising by virtue of his large Korean fanbase. Riggory also rises with a surprisingly large Korean fanbase. This shows, similarly to Girls' Planet, how the global group is often most similar to the unweighted group, since there are far more global votes than Korean votes. It also shows the insane power and importance of having a large Korean fanbase. Jae and Keita had huge numbers of global votes and were ranked 3rd and 4th by global votes, but because they were unpopular in Korea, being ranked 17th and 18th there, they lost their debut place, allowing Gunnock to rise to 5th. Similarly, if votes were equally weighted, neither Tere or Gyuvin would have debuted, but they rose and ranked 6th and 7th because of their Korean fanbase. A Korean fanbase also helped Hanbin beat out Matthew, even though Matthew seemingly received far more votes than him. Hence, the 50-50 ratio helped Mnet again, removing Jae and adding Tere. The only other really interesting notable thing is that Junghao had a large enough global fanbase, combined with a large enough Korean fanbase to rank 1st regardless. Good on him. Okay, now, who do I think was in Mnet's ideal lineup? Well, based on editing salience and other things like the trainees chosen for even, here's my educated guess. Hanbin, Junghao, Yijin, Gunnock, Tere, Park Hanbin, then Seungin or Jongwoo or Jiwoong, then Matthew and Keita. Let me explain. Obviously, Mnet want Hanbin as their centre, and I think they'd want Junghao to be 2nd, in yet another K beats G like Wonyoung vs Sakura. Note that I mentioned this same thing with an ideal Daeon rank 1, Hikaru rank 2 on Girls' Planet. That said though, Mnet might also decide they like the idea of Hanbin versus Yujin for 1st, since Yujin is their cute little baby maknae. After those 3, I reckon they'd want Gunnock, Tere and Park Hanbin. This gives them rappers, dancers and singers who also have good stage presence. I think the interim check was a clear attempt to bring Tere and Park Hanbin into the final group. After them, I think they have a choice between Seungin or Jongwoo. Both add to this group in terms of vocals and leadership and would probably be their next 2 choices for Korean trainee. They may also decide to go with Jiwoong. After their Korean quota is filled, we get an ethnically Korean global trainee, Matthew, and then Keita, a mandatory Japanese trainee, who also has a well-rounded skill set, and who I think they'd pick over any of their other global options. Considering Keita and Park Hanbin were basically given their own group with Even, which they take central roles in, yeah, I think Mnet liked them. This group has the expected 6K 3G ratio, and obviously the global trainees are at the bottom, outside of Junghao for drama. I think Mnet liked Jae 1 outside of the final group, for more drama of course. This final group, similarly to my predicted ideal lineup from Girls' Planet, is nicely balanced. Junghao and Tere as main vocalists, backed up by Hanbin, Matthew and Gunnock. A very strong dance team with both Hanbins, Junghao, Yujin and Gunnock. A stellar rap duo in Gunnock and Keita, backed up by Park Hanbin and Yujin. Leadership through Hanbin, Junghao, Gunnock and Keita. And again, similarly to Girls' Planet, lots of stage presence monsters. Seungin would add vocals, Jongwoo would add leadership and tie together the group's stage presence, and Jiwoong would bring idol experience and his pre-existing fanbase while being their dedicated sexy man. This group would suit all of the concepts Zero Base One have performed so far, with different members being able to take the lead for different songs. I swear I'm not doing this on purpose. I have in no way tried to balance this lineup out. But for both this and the Girls' Planet lineup, I've simply pieced together the members I think Mnet prioritised, and it just turns out that those lineups are balanced, which makes sense since Mnet want to create a balanced final group. I take this unintentional balance as proof that I'm on the right track. So I think Mnet got 6 or 7 out of 9 for their ideal Zero Base One lineup. More successful Riggory here. Unfortunately for them, Park Hanbin was too low in the votes, and would have ranked 12th by vote count. And Ricky was too high for their Riggory to make them switch places. But Hanbin is shining as the pseudo-centre of Even, so he's fine. Also, he smiled and waved at me before their concert. He's a fan service king, and I have to admit, even as anti-Delulu as I am, that moment did make me like him more. Okay, so now let's talk about the effect of Riggory on the final group. As you may have seen from my community post, I was originally going to title this minisode The Attempted Riggory of Boys Planet, The implication being, well, that the Riggory failed. And I suppose it kind of did, in that Hanbin didn't debut and Ricky did, but you may have noticed something in this video that I also noticed when I looked back at Boys Planet, which made me change the title. That being that, obviously, Mnet got their way with Zero Base One for the most part, and they learned from Girls Planet, making the Riggory more subtle. No one complained about Gunnock being the Dion of this season, even though he literally was, from a high beginning to a low middle, to being given tons of screen time and given tons of compliments, to even coming from Jellyfish and thanking her in his final speech. That last one was a coincidence. They even manipulated the show around him through the signal song performance. Viewers seem to have deluded themselves into thinking that they learned from Girls Planet and voted for a better lineup against Mnet's Riggory, and while this is true to a certain extent, for instance, we were more aware of the effects of the 50-50 ratio on global trainees, Zero Base One was super rigged, and that just let us think that we picked the lineup even though they led us right to it. Hence, although fans had concerns about Riggory, it wasn't directed at the members of the group as much as on Girls Planet, and the Zeros fandom were able to move on very quickly to other issues. I don't see any Zero Base One Riggory arguments, but I see Kepler rigging arguments to this day. Anyway, Zero Base One. They were always meant to be a more serious group after the experiment of Kepler, and Wake One and Mnet have treated them as such. Say what you want about their management, but I think it's pretty damn good, certainly in comparison to Kepler and the vast majority of the groups on the market. The main negative effect of the Riggory we see in the group is that Ricky and Guven, the members Mnet least wanted, tend to be shoved to the back. This was a very predictable outcome in my opinion, and we already had evidence this would happen, through Eugen and Bahie in Kepler. For all 4 members, I'm shocked their fan bases didn't realise that this would happen. Mnet aren't going to start treating your fave well just because they're popular. It sucks, sure, but in my opinion there's no point complaining, because all evidence shows that Mnet won't change even if it runs the group into the ground. Ahem, Kepler. I just want to add here, I'll mention this in my Boys Planet Riggory posts as well, but Bahie and Eugen fans, at least they had an excuse, right? It was the first season of the Planet series, so we didn't really know exactly what would happen, and it's reasonable to not assume, but it's reasonable to hope that Mnet would be honest in treating the people who got voted into the group well. But for Ricky and Guven fans, they had the evidence. Ricky fans especially, they had the evidence that Eugen and Bahie had been treated poorly. Yet they still decided to vote Ricky into the group, and then complained when, what a shocker, he was treated poorly. I just don't understand it. Similarly to Kepler, Mnet's faves get the most attention. Mostly in Zero Base One, this is Halbin, and to a lesser extent Gunnock, Tere, and Matthew. Eugen gets his own solo moments and attention, but he just straight up does not have the training and experience to take a central role right now. I think that's Mnet/Wake One's opinion as well as my own, so they promote him as a cute dancer maknae but give him smaller parts. Finally, what about the effect on later seasons of pseudo-produce? Well, first, Mnet got away with this Riggory, hence Island 2 was far more rigged, and they felt more comfortable returning even more to a produce formula with Boys 2 Planet. They even brought back the pick-me-up lyrics in the signal song, something notably missing from OOO, Here I Am, and Final Love Song. Also, there's been an interesting piece of speculation online. I haven't personally watched all of the Planet PR videos for Boys 2 Planet, but the people who have noticed that they felt bare and boring, surprisingly lacking in catchy one-liners, apparently. And some people have speculated that since Ricky made it into Zero Base One in spite of Mnet's evil editing through pretty much nothing more than his iconic one-liner and image, which was created through the Planet PR, well, maybe, just maybe, Mnet banned trainees on the second season from having the same virality potential. We have literally no proof of this, so take it with a bucket of salt, but it's definitely an interesting theory. Ricky literally couldn't be controlled by Mnet because of a single 10-second clip published before the show even aired. Alright, so with that said, and you all reminded of the iconic nature of Ricky making the lineup despite all odds, and giving a massive middle finger to Mnet before they gave a massive middle finger to him, let's finish up this minisode. Quickly, before I reach the dreaded 50-minute mark. Basically, Boys Planet was less obviously rigged than Girls Planet since Mnet learned their lesson and were far more subtle, especially with their angel editing and manipulation of Hanbin and Gunnock being far less obvious than Dion's editing. It was also slightly less rigged in general since the Planet Pass was absent and audience voting was allowed for live performances. But make no mistake, even these aspects were still rigged in Mnet's favour through the classic Planet 999 structures. Things like K versus G groups, star ratings, and screen time. In the end, Mnet got almost exactly what they wanted, and we can see this in the treatment of the final group, both in good and bad ways. They got their core most important trainees in, Gunnock, Hanbin, Junghao, and Yujin, with Matthew and Tele as vocal backups. They did get somewhat screwed over with 4 Yuhua trainees, and with Ricky and Gyuvin getting in, but they just get shoved to the back and then Mnet are happy. We can also see the progression from Girls Planet to Boys Planet. As systems like the Signal Song pre-show ranking, the cells, and the 3 groups weren't useful, they were scrapped, and Boys Planet returned to a produce style. In the end, what do we take away from this? This will probably be released during Boys 2 Planet, so be aware of the editing and Riggory. Also, Zero Base 1 were super rigged. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, I think we all like the group, but I don't want anyone to be deluded into thinking that they were fully organic, outside of Ricky. Remember my survival show motto, a critical thought a day keeps Mnet away. Begone, Mnet! Okay, so that's the end of the minisode. Thanks for watching, I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.